Such a romantic day today, and I'm going to cover a story that is romantic too. Romance has many meanings, it may have many layers, but in urban India, the concept of romance is slightly different from the concept of romance in urban India. So when in UPSC CSAT test or common aptitude test for civil services, a passage is asked that may not necessarily have the same setting as the setting in our real life. It then goes on to talk about how is our empathy, what is our EQ, and then also what is our IQ, what does our intelligence suggest, that we may not have experienced a certain set of situation and circumstances like the one which we find in form of a story in our passage. जो कहानी में है वो हमारी कहानी नहीं है, but जो कहानी में है वो कहानी हमारे देश की कहानी है, हमारे आसपास के लोगों की कहानी है और इसी प्लैनेट की कहानी है. तो फिर आती है एम्पैथी हमारे काम और हमारी इंटेलिजेंस हमारे काम की, हम उस पैसेज को कैसे देखते हैं. आज पैसेज है based on story of Manak and Guleri, very popular story written by a very popular author, Amrita Preetham. But the story goes back to 1950s. और 1950 एक ऐसा समय था जब देश नया नया आज़ाद हुआ था और लॉज इतने मजबूत नहीं थे या इतने वेल डेवलप नहीं थे, इतना सोचा नहीं गया था कि किन किन लॉज की जरूरत पड़ेगी. वो तो समय के साथ तब्दीलियां आई और थैंक गॉड तब्दीलियां आई कि वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट हुई, चाहे ये जितना स्केप्टिसिज्म के साथ देखा जाए. बट आई डोंट नो, अगर कुछ लॉज नहीं बदलते तो could I have come to these posh locations and have been able to work from these. So today's story is about Manak and Guleri. Let me bring the focus to these two people. The story is called Stench of a Kerosene. And as you can see, it's right there on my screen. Set against a rural backdrop, Stench of Kerosene is the story of the couple Guleri and Manak. Now, when I show you the story, I show you the passage, I assume that you're going to pause the video or you're going to look at the description box for some time and then going to come back to the video and listen to what I have to say, what I've brought from my classroom experience. So it's your time right now to look at the story, which is there on the screen. Lights. All right, guys. Sorry for that little pause. It was power cut, urban India. So I assume during the power cut, you paused and you read the story. Stench of Kerosene is the story of a couple, Guleri and Manak, who have been happily married for several years, but do not have a child. Manak's mother is desperate to have a grandchild to carry on the family name. Hence, she gets Manak remarried in Guleri's absence. Manak, who acts as a reluctant but passive spectator, is meanwhile informed by a friend that Guleri, on hearing that her husband's second marriage, poured kerosene on her clothes and set fire to them. Manak is heartbroken and begins to live as if he were a dead man. When his second wife delivers a son, Manak stares at the child for a long time and blurts out, "Take him away. He stinks of kerosene." This is a sensitive issue-based story which tries to sensitize the readers about male chauvinism and infidelity. What do you say? Male chauvinism and infidelity. तो क्या ये मर्दाना घमंड and धोखाधड़ी है? Love and betrayal, प्रेम और धोखा. Love, Sex and Dhokha was a very popular movie. Lack of legal safeguards for women. क्या गुलेरी और कुछ कर सकती थी? Or this passage is to sensitize the readers about influence of patriarchal mindset. Ki there has to be a child born in the family. What do you think it is? I'm giving you some time to mark and come back to it. And I have a very high-tech office here, so I might have to tap my foot on the ground so that there's no more power issue. Now here is what I highlighted, and I'd like you to pay attention to the highlights that you see on the screen. Set against a rural backdrop, Stench of Kerosene is the story of a couple, Guleri and Manak, who've been happily, watch that word, a quality word, happily. So their marriage was a happy marriage. Between the couple, it was happy for several years, but do not have a child. So there's a negative, and this negative is about not having a child. Manak's mother, she's another actor in the story, another character in the story, is desperate to have, desperation. There is a need and a desperate need of what? To carry on the family name. What do they need? A grandchild. Now, grandchild, you know, a few of my students, I'd like to call them participants of my session, rather, they question that grandchild could be a daughter, could be a granddaughter or grandson, not clearly mentioned. But then if you notice, you know, to carry on the family name, it becomes a very important marker, a very important line. Hence, she gets Manak remarried. I never give you answers, right? When I discuss the passage with you, why do I not give you answers? Because I want you to think on your own. I'm just facilitating, I'm just stimulating and giving you simulated experience. You got to answer that on your own. You got to find it out on your own. I'm facilitating. So I'm showing you the right words, the right phrases, which may hint at a solution. I've asked this passage in form of story in my storytelling sessions. I've given this passage to journalists. I've given this passage to very intelligent people, but I've often got a wrong answer to my amusement. Let's see how you look at it. Let's see what IQ, EQ you combine to solve this passage. Who, you know, when passage gets puzzling, it's more interesting. It gets more interesting. So who is Manak? Manak is Guleri's absent. What did he do? He remarried. And did he remarry willingly, or was he forced to? Why was he forced to? What made him think that that was important? This is my office, and I got to do this so that I get the power back. All right, coming back to where we were, Manak, who acts as a reluctant but passive spectator, is meanwhile informed by a friend that Guleri, on hearing about her husband's second marriage, poured kerosene on her clothes and set fire to them. So he did that in the absence of his wife, not in her presence. And he did that because he was forced to do that by his mother, who was desperate to get a grandchild to carry on the family name. Manak, who acts as a reluctant but passive spectator, at last he did that. He was reluctant, but he was a passive spectator of this entire scenario. He did not actively participate. He did not act on his reluctance. He did not act on what he wanted, but he acted on what circumstances wanted him to do. And see the location of these lines right in the middle of the passage. Right in the middle of the passage is a great location sometimes, because, you know, the first part is introducing an idea. The last part would conclude the idea, but the central part may just carry what this story has in its course, there we see Manak, who acts as a reluctant but passive spectator, is meanwhile informed by a friend that Guleri, on hearing about her husband's second marriage, poured kerosene on her clothes and set fire to them. She committed suicide. Why did she do that? Did she not have any legal safeguards? Couldn't she do anything about that? Manak is heartbroken. So Manak is not really happy because his wife died, his first wife died, and died heartbroken. He's heartbroken too. And he begins to live as if he were a dead man. He's not happy in his second marriage because he still remembers and he feels that pang of guilt in him. And that is why perhaps he goes on to live a life like that. When his second wife delivers a son, okay, that happens. Manak stares at the child for a long time, blurts out, and he blurts out, "Take him away." All right. And he blurts out, take him away. He stinks of kerosene. Right. So here we go. Right, again, I gotta do this again with you. Never mind, you're patient, things happen. Okay, so he blurts out, "Take him away, he stinks of kerosene." This is a sensitive issue-based story which tries to sensitize the readers about chauvinism and infidelity. Now you also see the meaning of the word chauvinism here, an attitude of superiority toward members of the opposite sex. That's male chauvinism. Also behavior expressive of such an attitude. Behavior expressive of such an attitude. Superiority toward members of the opposite sex. And in this case, members of female. Opposite sex here in the case is females. And so even if you look at Manak's mother, she is also showing, in this case, signs of having male chauvinism or adhering to that kind of thing. Okay, undue partiality or attachment to a group or place to which one belongs or has belonged, that is regional chauvinism. Excessive or blind patriotism, then that becomes jingoism, fervent nationalism, latent chauvinism. That's by this lady, that definition. Okay, coming back, love and betrayal. Lack of legal safeguards for women, influence of patriarchal mindset. What do you think it is? What do you think it is? What are most of the phrases in this passage referring to, hinting at? Most part of the passage, ways with which thought groups weight. What do you think it could be? If it were about love and betrayal, there would have been just Manak and not Manak's mother. Then there would have been just Manak being in love with another woman and not Manak getting remarried because of a need, which is there has to be a child to carry on the family name. If it were lack of legal safeguards for women, there would have been more discussion about lack of legal safeguards for women. But here Manak's mother is also involved. So the theme doesn't really focus on that. There has to be something more about this. Influence of patriarchal mindset and option number A and option A and option D. The first option and the last option, male chauvinism and infidelity. Now, infidelity here is again betrayal, dhokadari, being unfaithful. Is it about being unfaithful? If it were about being unfaithful more, then again, this child thing and the aspect that mother was so desperate to carry on the family name would not have been discussed. So this leaves us with one answer, which is hard to digest for urban India. In urban India, we are a little away from a lot of realities of life. Now, look at the word infidelity, the act or fact of having a romantic or sexual relationship with someone other than one's husband, wife, or partner. This is being unfaithful, to a moral obligation, disloyalty, lack of belief in a religion could also be seen as being infidelity. Right. So we registered that this is not so much as being unfaithful, like in the movie A Mother, where the sex is the most important attraction. Here there is something more, and this is urban India, Manak and Guleri, mostly Punjabi India. If you know India that well, that you can figure out the region from the names of characters, was patriarchy. Social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan or family, the legal dependence of wives and children, and the society or institution organized according to the principles or practices of patriarchy. Matrilineal societies in India are found somewhere. Where are they found? I'll keep the power button up by tapping my feet on the ground. And I want you to know, so in India, we have not just patriarchy, but matriarchy also, but hardly visible. And in parts of Meghalaya and Kerala, we see this tradition. And then some material from Wikipedia about polygamy. Because in the story, there is polygamy, there is no consent possibly. Guleri was not asked if Manak could be remarried. So what we see is polygamy. Was polygamy not allowed in 1950s when the story was written? Section 494 and 495 of the Indian Penal Code of 1860 prohibited polygamy of the Christians, but not Hindu. In 1955, the Hindu Marriage Act was drafted, which prohibited marriage of a Hindu whose spouse was still alive. Thus, polygamy became illegal in India in 1956. Uniformly for all its citizens except for Muslims who are permitted to have 4 wives, or for Hindus in Goa and along the western coast where bigamy is legal. So there are still exceptions to this law, imagine. A polygamous Hindu marriage is null and void, while the punishment specified in section 494 and 495 is applicable. It's rare if the first spouse doesn't have an objection. You get that? And we're talking about this story, this plot, when polygamy was still legal, or perhaps there was no law against it. Now, there's another source, statisticstimes.com. What does it say? In 2020, this is 2021, the sex ratio of the total population in India is 108.18 males per 100 females. Okay. So there is a bias which still exists. And if you're interested in reading it more, you can pause the screen, you can come back to the video and read what follows. I'm going to read the highlighted portions, which I found interesting and relevant for this discussion in this session. With about 110 boys born for every 100 girls, India has the world's 5th most skewed sex ratio at birth after China, Azerbaijan, Vietnam, and Romania. Well, during 1990, okay, this ratio was 1:1:1, and you see, goodness, okay, doesn't feel very nice to be 5th most skewed sex ratio country. The males to females ratio is the highest point, okay, in this age group. As per census 2011, the gender ratio of India is 943 females per 1,000 males. All right. What can governments do? You can always come back, pause this video, read all of this text, or ask me, shoot an email to me, or go along with me. What can governments do? This is what governments can do. Read at your own pace. I'm going to read the highlighted portion now. In Asian countries where infanticide is taking place, governments need to focus on prenatal preventive measures. Policies that prohibit sex screening and focus on female health are crucial to attempt to correct the low percentage of women in the society. You know what? There is one female feticide or infanticide that takes place before the birth of the baby, feticide, right? And then there is one that takes place after the birth of a girl child, which is killing her dreams, not letting her be herself. That is also a kind of feticide, or because she's not developing her thoughts, or infanticide, or a suicide, where it's a social mother of her dreams, aspirations. And then we still have child marriage in India. How sad is that? How sad is that? Countries with the lowest percentage of women in the population are UAE and 26.7%. Okay, read that part. Okay, I've got to wake up the part here. You read that part. Okay, UAE, but the cultural diversity here from the large influx of immigrants is skewed towards one gender. Why? The majority of these immigrants to the UAE are men, because the jobs that are available are male dominated. So that's UAE stories. The next country is Qatar. Okay, if it is pronounced that way. Second on list, 27.4%, and the reasons are similar to that of UAE because of immigration and nature of employment largely. Other Middle Eastern countries will be these. Yeah, here. Research indicates that countries with a higher proportion of men to women experience more violence, acts of insurgency, crimes of all kinds, and violence against women. Next is Bhutan and India. The next countries on the list are located in Asia. Bhutan has a 46.3% female population. India reports that 48.2% the population is female. That this imbalance has been attributed to a cultural preference for boys and increased technology that can determine the baby's sex before birth. Now, what is feminism? Am I getting feministic in my tone as I progress this discussion? Do you think that way? Is a range of social movements, political movements, and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. Read at your own pace. Now, we've talked about child marriage in India. This is the source I got this from. Result of the interplay of economic and social forces. Marrying a girl as a child is a part of a cluster of social norms and attitudes that reflect the low value coded to the human rights of girls. Child marriage negatively affects the economy and can lead to an intergenerational cycle of poverty. Goal 5, UNICEF and UNFPA have joined forces through a global program to accelerate action to end child marriage. Oh, well, a girl who's married as a child is more likely to be out of school and not earn money and contribute to the community. She's more likely to experience domestic violence and become infected with HIV/AIDS. Sadness. Wikipedia says Jharkhand is the state with highest child marriage rates in India. As of the date this Wikipedia column was added, when Kashmir is fine. Longest child marriage Restraint Act of 1929. Sarda Act, it was called. The Prohibition of Child Marriage Act came into 2007 into effect on November 1, 2007. Any male over 18 years of age who enters into a marriage with a minor or anyone who directs or conducts a child marriage ceremony can be punished with up to 2 years of imprisonment or a fine. 2 years is a lot of time, but it feels too short. Right, the next big thing, which is nice to know, is period leaves. What are periods? It's just that periods. So happily, I read this news article, which was about Zomato announced last month that it would allow female and transgender employees to take up to 10 days of paid period leave per year, and some men had a problem. And some women also had a problem. They felt that they were being seen as weak. But my question to them is, how masculine have modern women to be? Kuch to chodo. Some softness is, this is a hypocrisy. I don't know if it is a hypocrisy. It is our need. It is our right. And because we are still finding a place in a society which is largely male dominated, we are still allowed to be feminine, allowed to be ourselves, allowed to be biologically different. We don't have to develop muscles, definitely. So coming back to the story here where we started, Manak and Guleri, this is not urban India people where we'll think of love and betrayal. It is not about male chauvinism and infidelity, because the word infidelity gets added here. Otherwise, we could have considered male chauvinism. Lack of legal safeguards for women, all right, wake up. Is it about lack of legal safeguards for women? It's more about influence of patriarchal mindset. So winding up with this session here now. I hope it made sense as the evening progressed. I hope some wisdom dawned upon you. And wake up. So in our text, whether you're from urban India or from rural India, you've got to keep your mind open. That text can be context-based, and your empathy is required. Of course, if you have an ethical sense, that is amazing. If you also have some ethnic experiences by way of exposing yourself to good books or to good television programs, it'll work in your favor. So this was a story, and now I leave it up to you how you tackle the rest of remaining passages and rest of the concept. And thank you for joining me and watching this video till the end. Hopefully, stay connected.